Hi, in this tutorial we're going to take a look at rigging a higher poly 3D game model of a character. Now within this session what we're going to take a look at is trying to make a custom cat rig for this. We're also going to be looking at trying to differentiate between the body, the clothing and the hair and accessories. So we're going to have different skin modifiers on each of them so that we can work on them at a more sort of reasonable and manageable level. Now the reason for this is that what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have the loincloth being able to flap. We want the hair to be able to change in direction for the ponytail, and also want to be able to have some functionality of the hair strands. Alongside that, what we're going to need to try and make sure that happens is that the eyes and everything that encompasses the general eye area is connected to the rest of the rig so that it moves with it as well. So we've got a few considerations to make for when we go about rigging this object. Now to start off, what you want to make sure is that for the main model, the hierarchy point is placed directly at the bottom of the mesh and is in between the two feet. What you want to make sure that you do, if you're doing hair, is to rotate it outwards so it's not lying on the back of the character, because this will actually, when it comes around to perhaps skinning, you may get some issues with this, so it's always best to keep them separate. So we're going to give it a go at starting creating a custom cat rig, and by doing so, to begin with, what we're going to do is we're going to select everything that's in our viewport. We're going to press Alt X to turn it invisible, and we're going to right click, go to Object Properties, and within that we are going to click freeze and make sure that show frozen in grey is turned off. So what we are then not able to do is to click the model, so it's in position and we can continue to make everything as a part of a rig set up and easily be able to see it. So to start us off, what we're going to do is go into the create panel. Within this you're going to have to go over to helpers. You're going to change it from standard to cat objects and go to cat parent. With that, we're going to click on none because we're going to make our own. You can start with a base human or other types of rig, but we want to make one that's totally bespoke for our character. So what we're going to do, in the top view, we are going to drag out the floor base for our character and make sure that it's directly in the center of the scene. And with that, we're going to start off by creating a pelvis. If we go into the front view, we're going to be able to see where this lies. So we're going to drag this just below the feet with the base, and we're going to change the actual cat unit ratio so that the actual pelvis lines up with the pelvis on our character. Now take your time doing this, make sure that it lines up. What you should be looking for is making sure that it actually sits at the top of the waistband towards the top, so that this is going to actually slightly rotate and sit at the top of the pelvis point so that it hits the top of the lilac crest, so as we see on here. Now we want to keep it purposely in shape for the character, so we're going to try and expand it to a point where it actually fills the hip area. Now some of this will be linked with the leg later on, so we don't want to go too overboard, so we're just going to edit the width, height and length of the object so it sits inside of the object. And with that, we're going to move it slightly outwards, and the height, we want to make sure that it's just filling in that area between the top of the backside and the just above the lilac crest. Now with that, what we're going to do is create the rest of the rig. We're going to start off with the leg, so we're going to add first of all one of the legs, and what we need to do is to put it into the left or the right view, whichever is easiest to be able to see. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to make sure that the IK target, the inverse kinematic target for the foot, is just slightly below the actual foot itself. From there we're going to work our way up onto the foot, to the lower leg and the upper leg, and we're going to make all the changes to this before we add the other leg by clicking on the pelvis and adding the other leg, because if we spend the time doing one of them, as soon as we press the add leg on the opposite side, it will make a copy of this. So this is where I'm going to speed this process up. When it comes to the foot, you're only going to want the one bone for the ball of the foot for the controller, so we're going to change the amount of digits to 1 instead of 2. You're then going to want to make sure that your knee lines up with the joint and the topology so that it slightly bends towards the front. This is to help the process of the rigging. When you've completed putting it into place, you may want to edit the mesh of the rig by adding an edit poly modifier to it so that you can make further changes in order to fill the rest of the model. And when you're happy with it, you can right click the stack and convert it to a bone object again. What we're going to do next is work upwards, so we are going to do the remainder of the body before we move on to any of the clothes. They are going to have to be a part of the rig as well, but we're going to create the spine, and with the spine what we're going to do is we're going to give it 2 bones, so that we have 2 in between the pelvis and the rib cage. So this one for the rib cage, what we're going to do is we're going to line it up with the actual underneath of the chest. We're going to change the length, the width and the height, so that then it should be taking up the whole area of our rib cage but not the neck. So we're going to try and line it up so that the top meets the bottom of the neck. When it comes to the arms, it's really important that we get the clavicles and the upper arm and the other joints in the hand as well placed as possible. We'll place the clavicle just above the rib cage and slightly forward. We'll place the end of the upper arm where the deltoid of the shoulder would be. We'll place the end of the lower arm where the middle of the elbow joint will be, and we'll make sure that the wrist links to the end of the hand and stops at the end of the fingers. When that is done, you are able to rescale them so that they fit into the mesh, and then you'll be able to do the fingers. When it comes to the hands, we're going to choose how many digits it's got. So obviously we want 5, so we put 5 in and we get these. With that, what we want to make sure is that each of them has 3 links apart from the thumb. That's going to have 2, so we're going to change the bones to 2, and then we're going to change the length of them so that it comes back into place. It's going to take a little while, same process as before, just a little bit smaller and intricate, so take your time. When you've completed one of the arms of the rig, what you'll need to do is to click and create another arm. When you press this button, it will make a mirrored version of the first arm on the opposite side of the rig. When it comes to making the head and the neck of the rig, we're going to make a new spine. We're going to change the amount of links to either 1 or 2 depending on how much control of the neck that you want. We're going to make sure it's placed in the position of the head, this top new hub, and we're going to use the edit poly modifier to try and fill the space of the model as much as possible, so that when we add the skin modifier to the rig later on, it will successfully control the head area as well as possible. Okay, now that the majority of the actual rig is near enough there, we're going to need to add some of the other parts. So we have the loincloth, and we have the ponytail and little aspects of the hair. Now the ponytail is going to be the most important on this part. So what we're going to do is click on the head, and then we're going to add on a tail. This is going to come out of the head. What we want to do is click on it, change the amount of links to how many we've got here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 5 at the moment, so we change that to 4. And with that, what we're going to do is we will rotate it, move it into position in the side, and with each of them, it's easy to press Alt X and move the other into place so that we know that it's exactly in the location that we need the joint to be. So it should be directly in the middle of the breaks of the joints in the hair. We can do the same for the rest of them. When creating the bones for the clothing, they should be bespoke, and they should be created from bones in which help you get the function that you need for the certain clothing of your character. Now with this loincloth, I've just used a tail from the pelvis, so that what I can do is to shape that into 2 different parts that will control the front and control the back. So there's 2 separate tails for the front and back of that. If you have a more extravagant set of clothes, you'll need to make something that's a little bit more extravagant as well, in terms of a controlling rig for that part of the clothing. What's really good about this is that they will then be able to have separate skin modifiers on the clothing, so that they are only affected by the bones of the clothing as opposed to the rest of the rig as well, which is really helpful. Now when we've completed the rest of the rig, what we might want to do is add some controllers to help us for the hands. Now we've currently got IK targets for the feet. IK target is short for inverse kinematic target, and what it allows you to do is to move the foot or the legs in a line trajectory fashion. And what this means is that you don't have to rotate every joint within the legs and feet in order to be able to change its position in terms of coordinates. Now this is quite important as well at some points when you want to do movement for perhaps pushing an object and have to show weight. As the legs look like they're actually assigned to the floor and showing the weight of the body, we want to add these to the hands as well in order to help us. Now when we're using inverse kinematics, as mentioned, it means that the end effector, so the furthest part away from the center of the rig, actually affects the rest of the bones. So in this case, if we're working on the hands, the IK target for the hands is going to affect the rest of the arms. When we're wanting to change it from FK to IK, we use the simple slider in the motion panel in order to help us. Now we can do this a flick between them when we're animating. However, it's up to you really how in which you want to use your rig to best animate your character. Once you've got IK targets or FK manners of working for the parts of the body in which you want the control with, you can add some more gizmos or controllers as well to other parts of the body. Now what you can actually do is to right click a certain aspect of the rig, so here the upper arm, you can right click on it and you can add a gizmo, and what this gizmo does is it will help you see where you can control the rotation of a certain joint in the rig. This will then be quite evident within the model when it's skinned, so you can actually work by animating a single bone of the body whilst also having the inverse kinematic controller on the hands as well. So it enables you to kind of do FK changes to an IK controlled set of limbs, which I think is really helpful, especially when it comes to controlling aspects of the body. So usually I would say the best places to put them are the wrists, the elbow joint, the shoulder joint, the knee, and also around the ankle, and potentially around some of the spine links as well, in order to get some individualized rotation if it's required within the animation. You can add them if and when you need them. You don't have to have them. You can add them before or after the skinning process. So if you think it's going to get in the way, you can remove them as well. All you have to do is click on the gizmo and press delete, and then they'll disappear. It's really as simple as that. So use them if you need to add functionality to your rig. If you don't require them and feel like they're going to sort of confuse you a bit more, don't bother. When you've successfully finished your rig, make sure you click the base and press save, so you can save your rig. So if you lose any of your work from now on, you'll always have the rig saved. When you've completed the rigging process, you're going to need to select your model and make sure that you apply the modifier skin onto it. So go onto the modifier list, scroll down, click on skin, open up, press Control and C on the character hub, press select, everything will be a part of it. Now once we've added the bones to the object, we go to the motion panel, we click on the one of the parts of the object. It's currently in setup mode, so we're going to need to make an animation layer in order to be able to animate it. So we're going to click and hold ABS, select it again, and then we're going to press the red button, and it's going to turn it to the animation mode. Now this is helpful because now we're going to be able to move aspects of the rig. I'm going to click the IK target, and we can see how the skin is affected by the rig, and it allows us now to go in and make all the edited changes in which we need to, so that it looks as visually pleasing as possible. And to continue doing that with the other parts of the body as well. Now when this happens, you're going to want to make sure that you isolate the scene to only show your model, so that you don't click on any of the rig accidentally, because the main focus here is the visual of the mesh when it is rigged using the skin modifier. We see that it's not done the greatest of jobs on our leg. Now what we're going to have to do, scroll down, open up the weight tool, make sure that in display color all weights is clicked, and turn on edit envelopes. Now with this is where we need to start doing some of the alterations to our model. Now with vertices turned on, we're able to select our mesh, holding two of them and pressing loop. It will select the whole loop of the object. So at the minute we can see that 24.8 is allocated to the thigh and 75.2 is allocated to the lower leg. As we can see the envelopes, if we click them, what we're going to do is we're going to slightly press the plus sign to allocate them more to the lower leg, and we're going to sequentially go through, just making small alterations to each loop to make sure that it fits the natural visual of the leg. Now this is something that's going to take some time, so don't expect there to be an automatic button. So you're going to have to go through and assign them based on each individual part of the mesh as it goes. Some areas may need more attention than others. So for instance, the knee here, we will need to do certain aspects of it separately. So not everything is going to be a part of a loop. Some of it will be a part of an individual aspect, and you will have to change them based on the visual in which you need. Now this process, as I've mentioned, isn't the quickest. It is very time consuming. It's based on trying to get the mesh to act as visually pleasing as possible with the rig, whilst the rig is controlling it through the skin modifier. Now it does become progressively more difficult around centralized hubs, so the hips, the shoulders, anywhere where we've got multiple limbs joining together. What is beneficial, if you can, in your topology around these areas, is to provide a little bit of a cut-off point or a taper of sorts in order to help you. But the most important thing overall for the topology of your mesh is that you make sure that the edges continuously flow, so that you are able to see where they are flowing to and coming from. Now it's good to also change the view of the model so you can see what it's going to look like with the texture on top as well. And this is a time to use any of the tools of the weight painting that are beneficial to you to get as good of a final result as possible. When you've completed the editing of the skin, you're going to right click and unhide all of the rig. You're going to want to return it to its original state, so you're going to click on the pelvis, go into the motion panel and delete the absolute layer of animation. Okay, when the rest of the skinning has been complete, you're going to want to do separate skin modifiers on the bralette and also on the loincloth. Now it's easier to do separate skin modifiers on accessories and clothes so that you can get more control of them and they don't snap to the hips, the head or anything like that, specifically when looking at the hair, the clothing, anything that comes away from it. So what we're going to do is apply separate skin modifiers to each of the pieces of clothing, and we're going to decide which bones are attached to them. So what we're going to need is hub 2, and we're also going to need the tails. So we're making sure that all of them are selected. We're going to select and we're going to remove all the parts that we don't need. So we don't need the head. We need hub 2 because that's the hips. We're getting rid of the collarbone. We get rid of all the fingers on the left hand side. We get rid of the left hand, left heel, all the lower on the left hand side, lower spine and all the right hand side. All we want to have left is the tails and the hub. Now we're just going to click off first of all and make sure that we have got rid of all the parts that we want. So this tail 1 is at the actual hair, so we're going to get rid of that. We're just clicking through with the edit envelopes on to see which ones that we want to get rid of. So tail 1 here we're going to remove, the tail 2 we're going to remove, and also tail 3 here we're going to remove, and tail 4 we're going to remove. So we should only have the ones that are on the loincloth and the hips. So now with that, what we're going to do is we're going to select the bones of the hub and the tails for the front, back and the model. And what we're going to do is we're going to right click and isolate the selection. So this gives us just this aspect to work on. When we're editing it, we're going to turn edit bones on and vertices exactly the same way as we had. And what this allows us to do is to move these bones into a specific position and be able to then edit them correctly. So what we want to do is keep a lot of the top of this loincloth connected to the actual hips so it stays in place, and then the remainder of it we're going to gradient all the way down so that it's controlled by these bones as a part of the loincloth movement. So I'm going to speed this process up. And just remember, when you want to get the rest of the scene back, right click an empty area of the screen and press unhide all. When you've completed the separate parts of the skinning of the clothing, you should get a little result that looks a bit like this. Because it was allocated to the top of that, we see that the clothes move with the rest of the body, but also you'll see that the individual aspects of the clothing will move only based on what we skinned using its own skin modifier, which is really beneficial. Makes it a lot easier when we're editing as well, to see the changes in which we can make to our model. Now, had we not done this, we're making the changes to the bones, this is what would have happened. Some of the bones would have been affecting the leg and vice versa. So it's really good to make all of your clothes and separate geometries have separate skin modifiers so that they work as best as possible. Now we're also going to want to add the eyes to the head, so what we're going to do is just click on the head part of the rig. We're going to make sure that each of the eye components, when selected, are going to be separate and that they have the pivot lined up to them, so we effect pivot only, center to the object, and make sure this is the inner and the outer eye. So we're going to have eye, we select them and make sure that they are individualized as well, so we can do that by clicking the element, detaching each of them. So with this one we can call it eye left, and the opposite will be eye right, so that then what we can do is select all of them, go to the schematic view, make sure that they're all together, zoom in a little bit. With that, then what we can do is we can link all of them to the character head, which is this one here. So we can see that the character head, the third one down, click all of those, and we're going to link the child parts to the parents, so that when we rotate the head bone, we will see that the eyes move with the object as well. And this will have to be done with any of the parts that you want to move alongside with the rig, unless you skin them as well. However, we don't want the eyes to deform in shape, so we're going to get them to follow the rest of the rig. As you can see, we'll have to do that with the mouth of the character and the eyebrows and the eyelashes as well. And when you've completed one of the pieces of clothing, it's best just to move sequentially through the rest as well. So now the loincloth's done, we'll move on to the bralette and also move on to the hair as well. So take your time with it. Rigging isn't the fastest process, it does take some time, but you'll definitely see the rewards and the benefits of time well spent when it comes to the animating afterwards. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. You can find us on our YouTube channel at 3D Rob or Lewis Sanderson, where we take you through a variety of different processes of using software in order to make computer game models